Hello again, and welcome to our next round of our hospitality law virtual seminars produced by HospitalityLawyer.com. Today's focus is on risk management and loss prevention challenges in the hotel and restaurant industries. Today's date is August 2nd, 2023. I would like to remind everybody about our next program in our series, which will happen in the fourth quarter, Legal Challenges in the Contract Food Service Management Industry, Wednesday, November 15th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Also, please remember that we will be hosting our 2023 Hospitality Law Conference in the fall in Washington, D.C., Wednesday, October 18th. It's a one-day program at the spectacular Army-Navy Country Club in Arlington, Virginia. So today, please note that none of the speakers can deliver legal advice. They are providing their opinions, and it's not to be imputed to their employers or their clients or any other organization. This is for educational purposes only. So with that, if you have a question during the program today, please submit it through the chat, and we'll do our best to get to it. After each presentation, we will have time for some Q&A and to pick up those in the chat and or others that other panelists might want to ask. Kicking us off today, cyber management and insurance coverage, risk landscape with ransomware and other perils on the rise. This program is presented by Joshua Gold. Joshua is a shareholder with Anderson Kill PC in their New York office. I want to make sure that everybody understands that Josh and his team at Anderson Kill, they represent policyholders so that when you have a claim that goes awry or doesn't go as planned, or you don't think you're recovering as much or your claim is denied, Josh and his team are who you want to look to for assistance in those types of claims, and he can explain it more in his presentation. But look at the number that they've been able to recover. Josh himself has been in excess of 1.5 billion in recoveries. He's also the chair of the Cyber Insurance Recovery Practice Group and co-chair of the Marine Cargo Insurance Group. Josh has a broad scope in his practice. He and his team have a national practice, again, representing policy holders. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Joshua Gold.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Appreciate it. Hope everyone can hear me, and good morning to everyone. So today we're going to cover for about the next 25 minutes or so some key cyber risk issues that really could apply to any industry, including obviously hospitality, retail restaurants, anything dealing with hospitality type risks. And it's an area where once upon a time, these risks may have been isolated to a few high-tech industries. Those days are long gone for 10, 20 years now in terms of the emergence of cyber risk and how absolutely pervasive it is. So what I'd like to do this morning is try and go through some of the risk areas. It's a little hard to protect against them. It's a little hard to minimize them. It's a little hard to even insure them if you don't even know what your risk landscape or exposure is for your given business or even for your given industry. And then we'll talk about some kind of practical approaches on how to build a better insurance mousetrap, how to preserve your rights, how to protect your rights, and if the unfortunate should occur where your insurance company is really giving you a hard time on either paying very little or paying zero on your insurance claim, we'll get into reference to at least a couple cases that are somewhat emblematic of what is going on in the legal world when it comes to cyber risk, insurance coverage, and the law governing the intersection of those two things. So first off, looking at where we are on cybersecurity, we've got some issues where, most of us are back from remote working in the hospitality world. Remote work was not even a viable thing, but to the extent that your senior management or employees were doing some version of that, right, it obviously extended the cyber perimeter of an organization. So all of a sudden, lots of entities had a much larger footprint, so to speak. Everyone had a home office. And even if your business did not necessarily have that extended remote periphery to guard against, you can bet that a lot of your vendors did have that situation. So the thing I like to say about risk management is, in the cyber world, you're really as strong as your weakest link. And we'll get more into kind of the issues of insurance coverage in a minute. But a lot of things can be done to do really two things. One is to harden your defenses against cyber criminals. And another thing you can do is, even though there's no step or approach you can take that is foolproof in guarding your systems, you can certainly take certain steps. In fact, you're probably obligated right now to not do the bare minimum, but to actually be proactive here. And by doing that, you can actually minimize the fallout if your friendly state attorney general comes knocking and says, what on earth is going on here? A bunch of my constituents are complaining that they got hacked or that their privacy has been violated. Or alternatively, you could hear from the FTC, you could hear from HIPAA if medical information of your employees was to escape the genie bottle. So all kinds of things can happen. And that is why it's very important, even if you feel like there's nothing we can do to ever fully secure our systems, it doesn't matter. The law is now imposing an obligation that we at least try. And it's not just your industry. We in the legal community, you may have seen some headlines. Big international law firms have been hacked. You probably heard about the Panama Papers case. You probably heard about a gigantic law firm called DLA Piper. You may have even heard about the SEC suing a law firm called Covington over a hack they recently experienced. So really, no industry is immune. Even those people who you think are great at protecting themselves legally are not immune from this risk. So what do you do to lock down things? Well, it starts with prudent risk management, right? You meet with internal and external IT people. Some of you may be large enough to have your own in-house IT groups. Some of you may have to outsource that. But it is not enough for the management to simply delegate to the head of IT, because your head of IT actually may feel that his or her marching orders is to make the system as accessible and as convenient as humanly possible. And while that enables 24-hour business and all the efficiencies and good things we like about technology, it also means that there's lots of doors open to your systems that cyber criminals can infiltrate. And so it's important within your internal and external IT group to absolutely make sure that they also have an idea about security. Sometimes security means locking systems down, maybe restricting some access. Maybe it means slowing things down. I know this goes counter to everything we think about in a real-time world, but the reality is it takes a lot longer to recover from a cyber incident than the few seconds you lose by making sure your employees are carefully looking at what attachments they're opening, what links they're clicking on, the way in which they conduct their computing. A lot of you may use cloud computing, right? You have vendors which host, manage, store, transmit data. That may all be good, but you have to make sure that's, comporting with your business's IT strategy. You can't just have one division or one employee decide they're going to go dump data on some cloud platform that is unknown to your head of IT. So again, it's very important to map data, know what you have, and a big thing these days with the proliferation of ransomware is making sure that your IT group is smartly engineering the network architecture to make sure your backup systems are isolated from the rest of your systems. Backup systems do you almost no good if literally they get infected with malware along with your real-time systems. And so those entities that are able to, kind of put a hermetic seal around their backup systems, do much better recovering from a ransomware incident than others do. Another key thing to keep in mind about ransomware these days is if you are hit with ransomware, it very likely can be a privacy disclosure event as well. So it's not just having your files encrypted and being unable to use the computer system in whole or in part. It may also implicate the fact that a lot of ransomware software these days actually is simultaneously locking systems and exfiltrating data. In other words, they're stealing the data or copying the data right from your systems. As soon as data is taken off your systems or copied, you immediately have the prospect of a privacy violation event. And that means not only are you having this kind of what I'll call first party loss, right? Which is I'm losing money, my systems are down, I have a business interruption. In addition, you now have a liability risk here, because what happens when consumer information is exposed? You can bet there's going to be a lot of class action lawyers lining up to bring a class action privacy suit in any place in the country possibly, and basically giving you that double whammy of not only having ransomware interfere with your operations, but now you also have a major third-party liability issue. So let's go to the next slide. So a few things you can do up front, and it's money and time very well spent, is absolute preparation to deal with a problem. Now, I've got a few items on here which you can consider. None of these are necessarily the gospel. You'll have to tailor it to the size of your business, the kind of data you hold, whether you've got a vendor holding your payment card information, whether you're holding it, whether you've got password information of your guests. It can vary. Some of you might be publicly reported companies. Some of you may be small mom and pop operations. It doesn't matter. A lot of the approaches you take are literally geared toward meeting your obligations, whether imposed at the local, state, federal, or even international level, if you have any exposure to the European Union's GDPR rule. So again, you want to take this risk very seriously. You want to think before the crisis, right? Before there's a hacking event, before there's even a negligent disclosure event. Who will be in charge of what? Who's going to be the public face? What would you say in various situations? Who would you hire for forensic computing advice, for public relations advice, getting a breach coach for those of you that buy cyber insurance? Those policies, I'm usually not a fan or cheerleader for the insurance industry, but I will say some of those cyber policies, if you get a quality cyber policy, they can provide you with a slate of professionals on very quick order. All of them have been vetted. They usually have relationships with your insurance companies, so it's a pretty, seamless approach to get them assisting you as soon as you learn of the breach. and get these professionals in place, because you are going to need the help. There's very few organizations that can handle any breach, a small one, a mid-sized one, a big one, without some professional assistance. Let's go to the next slide, Marilyn. Great. And let's talk a little bit about how cyber exposures occur here, because I think most of us think about, oh, there's some, hacking gang in Russia or China or Iran who's, targeting, businesses across the globe. Sometimes that is the case, right? We've seen, the NotPetya virus from summer of 2017. We've seen Chinese infiltration of certain sensitive systems. We've certainly seen a lot of Russian activity in this space, cryptojacking, ransomware, malware, business email compromise scams, the whole gamut. But sometimes, just sometimes, and it's a big sometimes even, we actually have situations where there's actually no criminal present. We just mishandle data, or the technology doesn't work. It's no one's fault necessarily, but things happen. I'll give you an example. There was a health insurance company that had sensitive health information of its customers, protected by HIPAA, and that information got put on the wrong side of their firewall. It was stored on a server that could be searched through any typical Google search, and it could come up. And so that ended up being a multi-million-dollar liability for them. They were sued in a class action. Their insurance company denied their coverage, and the Fourth Circuit, thankfully for the policyholder and thankfully for our side of the fence, where we represent policyholder interests, found that there was CGL, or general liability coverage, for them. But again, some of these hacks can be intentional. Disgruntled employees, it could be hackers, right? But sometimes it could be just someone left a laptop with unencrypted data on their hard drive, and they left it in the backseat of their car, and they ran into Starbucks, and when they got back, the laptop's missing. Laptop probably wasn't stolen for the data in that instance. However, if it had unencrypted sensitive data on it, that may be a reportable situation to your state regulator under the state breach notification laws. And that lost laptop, even if it was just being sold on a street corner for $50 for someone who was just desperate to have something to sell to get some amount of cash in, it's assumed to be a hacking event or a breach event, even though at the end of the day, employee probably didn't secure the data terribly well. And the thief here really is not what we think of as your prototypical cyber criminal. So again, these things can happen lots of different ways. Let's go to the next slide, please. Just some stats here. I won't dwell on these, but again, business email compromise fraud, it's still a big deal. You'd think that we've gotten over the prince who wants to, email us and give us $10 million if we give them some bank account information, right? A lot of those emails, thankfully, are not, given serious thought anymore by our colleagues, by our employees, by our family members. They're kind of sniffed out as the fraud it really is. However, what's happening with business email compromise fraud now is it's getting a lot more targeted, right? So you get an email and it looks like it's from your chief executive officer, or it looks like your colleague in accounting, or it looks like it's from a client or a family member, or from one of your banks asking you about account information. And unfortunately, there's still too many employees that end up letting the genie out of the bottle, or letting the fox into the hen house, or any other expression that is apt in this case. Very, very important that one of the things we do it here at my firm, you all should be doing it at your respective places of business, is constantly training your employees with tabletop exercises friendly reminders about how to be careful, how to secure systems, because it just takes the weakest link again, which is an employee who's in a hurry or didn't think about it or could have sworn that they knew the person, or they're in a hurry, right? They're reading something on their mobile device and they don't realize in the email address from the email they're receiving, there's an extra I or an extra T, right? A little hard to see. Just slow it down. Tell your employees they're allowed to slow it down and call up IT and have them open up anything suspicious in a quarantined environment so that the whole operation isn't compromised by one of these business email frauds. They're out there. It can inject malware. It can just let the fox into the hen house, or alternatively, you can end up corresponding with someone you think is your CEO, and meanwhile you're wiring $4 million out the door and getting that money back. It's not impossible. Sometimes the FBI can recover some of it, but more oftentimes than not, it ends up in a bank account in China and it's gone forever. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, cyber prevention, again, this is not an exhaustive list, but it's kind of basic things, which is update your software, patch where you need to, restrict internal access to certain categories of data. Not everyone needs to see payment card data. Not everyone needs to see documents from your most senior management. Not everyone needs to be able to access all levels of customer information. I mentioned this, train employees and then train them again. Retire old computer systems. I know it's painful. We've had to do it here, but when those systems, even if they still work, if they become unsupported by the vendors or by the companies, sometimes you have to bite the bullet, buy a new expensive program because at least it's supported, it's updated. So keep those things in mind. Let's go to the next slide, please. I want to talk about the Wyndham case. And again, I'm not meaning to pick on Wyndham here, but Wyndham had some fairly large breach battles, and it was kind of a tale of two outcomes. So I'd like to talk about outcome one, which was not so good, and outcome two, which actually was quite good. So some of you may remember a number of years ago, Wyndham suffered a few breaches of information, including information involving its guests. And so the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, came after Wyndham pretty hard. And they were very zealous. They sued Wyndham in a district court in New Jersey. The district court said the FTC had regulatory authority to enforce what the FTC was saying was lax security, and basically accusing Wyndham of unfair trade practices, which again, historically had not really ever contemplated cyber resilience, cyber security, cyber liability. FTC then had the case go up to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which includes Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and I think Delaware. Wyndham had appealed the unfavorable district court ruling, and the Third Circuit agreed with the district court and basically said the FTC had regulatory authority here to sue, to go after Wyndham and any other entity within the FTC's purview for cybersecurity representations on the website of Wyndham about how they secured data, how robust their data security was. And so that was not a great outcome for Wyndham. Wyndham, as part of this unfortunate ordeal, also got sued in class derivative shareholder litigation. And basically, again, the allegations were shareholders were harmed, their stock prices were harmed because Wyndham didn't do enough to protect data and didn't take the cybersecurity seriously enough. And the court there actually found in favor of Wyndham, basically saying because the board met regularly, brought up the issue of cybersecurity, there was grounds to find that Wyndham did take the risks seriously, and that their business management practices and decisions were sound, even if they got hacked, right? In other words, anyone can get hacked. It's really a question of, are you able to demonstrate that you took the risk seriously? You didn't try and, cut corners. And so there, the fact that the most senior management of Wyndham, the board of directors, met regularly, were in touch with senior officers of Wyndham, that went a long way in insulating Wyndham from shareholder liability. So again, just keep that in mind, right? Which is, it's not a question of whether or not you get hacked. Most entities over their lifetime are going to get a data compromise incident event. The big key here is showing that you've taken it seriously, you've dedicated reasonable resources and senior management input and buy-in, and that you did what you could to secure your systems. It won't be perfect, you'll still have expenses, but it will minimize the liability, and it will make a bad situation somewhat better, and it's better than nothing, and it's money well spent for sure. Next slide, please. Some cyber insurance issues. You probably have heard that, cyber for many years was actually very affordable, lots of competition in the marketplace. And if you had a good insurance broker by your side, you usually could end up with pretty good protection at a not crazy price when compared to, say, what your GL coverage might cost, or your property insurance might cost, or your directors and officers insurance might cost. So that was kind of the glory days. Then what did we have? Just an insane scourge of ransomware from 2017 on, and finally the market got hard right around the beginning of the pandemic, and it was hard for a couple of years. That market is starting to soften up somewhat. It's not as good as it was pre-pandemic, but it's not as bad as it was just a year or two ago. So my advice is, find yourself a good insurance broker and get a quality cyber product, because there's still some very valuable coverage built into that. It can deal with both first-party risks, like your business interruption, the cost of getting computer forensic people in the door to analyze your systems, figure out what was stolen, how much. It also provides liability coverage for privacy type risks and the like, class action risk. You still need to have your D&O insurance coverage intact. You may want E&O insurance, CGL, property. All of those policies are not replaced with the cyber policy, but the cyber coverage is a very valuable and important piece of the puzzle if you're looking to transfer that risk to a third party like an insurance company. But again, there's not a lot of uniformity of product. There's a lot of different competitors out there, and they all do their own thing. And some stuff is good, some stuff has problems, and that's kind of true across the board. So my advice to everyone is, get yourself an insurance broker, and don't deal with the guy who's good at taking people out to dinner and golf. Get the person at the insurance broker that actually reads the policies, understands the marketplace, and can get you the best policy, and then endorse the policy where you need to meet your organization's risk. For instance, many of you are taking payment card information. It's very important to have your policy speak directly to payment card theft, fines, assessments, the brands that come after retailers and hospitality firms for breach events where there's lots of fraud charges on the credit cards, or they have to reissue as for being proactive in the space when there's been a compromise of payment card information. So again, work with someone that can custom tailor a cyber policy for you. It's money well spent. And again, it's not as inexpensive as it used to be, but it's still, I think, a very valuable protection, and it's money well spent in this environment. Let's go to the next slide. And I just want to wrap up with a couple of thoughts here on insurance. I kind of alluded to this with the cyber policy, but if you have a cyber event, right, whether it's a negligent disclosure of information, or indeed you've got some cyber criminal lurking out there, whether on this continent or another continent, do make sure that you've got your other policies considered. My advice to everyone as a policyholder advocate is, if you have an event, given notice to all of your insurance companies promptly across the board. It's easier to take back a notice for something where you didn't really need the policy's coverage because it gets picked up somewhere else. Easier to retract that notice than it is to make notice a year down the road, 6 months down the road, even 4 months down the road. Insurance companies love contesting coverage on the fine print. And so they will basically argue, if your notice was late by even a month, they're allowed to void your coverage. Now, there are arguments that we can make for policyholders and do every day of the year on these time-sensitive arguments that the insurance company didn't know, or everything was late, or something else, the notice was deficient. Whatever their arguments are, you may be able to beat those in court, but it is time-consuming, it's expensive. So you're much better off, if there's an event, give notice to every potentially applicable policy. And then when the dust settles a bit and you know the extent of the compromise, or you know how much data was stolen, or you know more particulars about it, then you can take a look and consider whether or not you need to pursue coverage on all avenues. So let me wrap up here to stay within our time allotment, and happy to leave a few minutes for any questions.
Marilyn, while I'm visiting with Josh, can you go to his last slide with his contact information? Ladies and gentlemen, if you should take a screenshot or a photograph of that, because you'll want to know about him and his team at some point in time. As he mentioned, Josh, that was terrific. Josh, we don't have any questions in the chat, but I would like for you to spend a minute or two helping the audience to understand kind of the scope of Anderson Kill. There aren't that many law firms out there that do what you guys do. Can you help everybody walk away with a clear understanding of why they would reach out to you guys?
Sure. No, thank you, Stephen. Happy to. So our firm, as I think Stephen pointed out before, has always been on the side of policyholders. Most of our clients are corporate policyholders, so larger organizations versus individuals. So we don't really handle auto cases or the like. But we specialize in just about any kind of commercial insurance dispute. Some of you, unfortunately, may have had this experience and know this all too well. But insurance companies don't just deny individual suits for HMO benefits or a car insurance claim or anything of that nature. They also will contest insurance coverage for some of the largest organizations on the planet. So we handle mostly insurance coverage claims for very large clients and mid-sized businesses. And once in a while, a family that has some kind of high-end insurance issues. We deal with all kinds of complex litigation that unfortunately usually is paired with insurance coverage denials. We do third-party liability claims. We do first-party property insurance claims. We have a hospitality industry that I think you all have probably encountered before. My colleagues Diana Glideman and Dennis Nolan head that up at our firm. And so they absolutely cater to the hospitality industry. But we mostly get involved when there is a claim denial, or the insurance company doesn't deny the claim entirely, but the policyholder feels like they've been shortchanged. And so we can come in, we're very candid. We will not push you into a bad case if we think it's a loser, or if the insurance company, just has a a clear advantage. We know that, resources are limited and they're valuable. So we try and be very, very upfront about what, the prospects are. We never know the outcome of litigation, just because there is no certainty in any litigation, insurance coverage litigation included. But we certainly can use our experience, which, is well over half a decade now, of representing policyholders in usually cutting edge insurance coverage fights. And cyber is probably one of the most cutting edge areas of insurance these days. You'd think there might be a little more law, given the fact that, right, we've been dealing with, breach situations since at least 2004, 2005, on a pretty decent scale. And even before that, all kinds of computer issues with computer damage, lost data, tapes erased, anything you can think of. But we absolutely advocate for policyholders. We don't represent insurance companies. And the only exception to that rule is once in a while, we'll represent a life insurance company that itself needs its own insurance coverage. In other words, it's in the role of a policyholder, and they'll hire us to go get their D&O insurance or their E&O insurance or their property insurance, because their own insurance companies are denying their coverage. So again, we have seen all industries, all types of policyholders, all types of insurance products, and there's probably not an insurance coverage dispute that we cannot handle. And if it's too small for us, then we can always refer, prospective clients out to other, smaller firms or solo practitioners that might be better suited for handling their particular case.
That's very helpful, Josh. Thank you.
Sure.
And great information in your presentation. Thanks for joining us. Please thank the entire AK team for us. And ladies and gentlemen, let's say thank you to Joshua Gold. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.